Welcome to BSR Conference 2015. I'm Aron Cramer, the President and CEO of BSR, and it is an honor every year. It's a delight every year to welcome you. This is the one time when we're able to be with a large part of our broader community, hear what you're doing, share what we're doing, and hopefully learn some new things and build some new and exciting opportunities to make progress on sustainable business. So welcome, and welcome to San Francisco. San Francisco is really BSR's home city. It also is a city that is very actually appropriate given our theme this year, resilient business, or resilient world. I have it backwards, I should know this. Resilient business, resilient world. San Francisco has been a place in which over the last 150 years, there are actually lots of examples of how resilience plays out, and examples of how resilience is tied to its twin sibling of disruption. This is a place that knows a lot about disruption, but could also, I think, teach the world quite a lot about resilience. If you think about some of the iconic companies that have grown up in this part of the world, you go back to the time of the gold rush in the middle of the 19th century, which basically made this city what it is. And during the gold rush, an immigrant named Levi Strauss figured out that he could sell some really strong pants to people who flooded in to make their fortune. And of course, the company that bears his name grew out of that. More recently, the Summer of Love in the 1960s inspired Don and Doris Fisher to create a company that would meet the needs, again, with clothing for a generation that saw the world in a very different way. And that's how the Gap got started. Less positively, but really interestingly also, the AIDS crisis, which ravaged the city and got the world's attention in the late 1970s, also helped to generate a lot of the activity that led to the creation of the biotech industry that is so strong here. So we've seen all of these fundamental social changes and the way that business people have figured out how to turn them into opportunities, create something that's new. We also know about environmental challenges here. We will do our best not to have an earthquake during the conference, but they have happened here, as I think you know. Most recently in 1989, and I did live through that one, it was quite something. The city, some of you may know, there was a terrible, ugly freeway that kept the city separate from the waterfront, and the city decided not to rebuild it. So it built back much better after that event by thinking differently about how to respond. And today we're dealing with a drought of historic proportions, and that's one of the reasons why here in San Francisco and also in California overall, we can be proud of the fact that leadership in addressing climate change is happening, because we're trying to figure out how to build in economic and environmental resilience to face that disruption. And the lessons that come out of this region, which is so obsessed really on building what's new, is that you build back better. Things change and you think ahead. How do we get past current challenges and build something that's much stronger? That's the essence of resilience. And I started with a little bit of history to ground us here in the San Francisco Bay Area and understand what we can learn from this part of the world. But really, resilience is important because it helps us figure out how to build the future that we all want. And if you think about it, and we just completed a board meeting, our BSR board met thinking a bit about our strategy and thinking about the many ways that the world is changing. And I think we all know that, in fact, some of the assumptions that have shaped our view of the world over the last 25 years, let's say, are fading away and fading very fast. You know, the growth in big emerging markets that have driven demand for everything from iron ore to Birkin bags, that wave, the commodity super cycle, is probably over. We have seen these big global supply chains over the last 25 years that are now in the midst of being disrupted by 3D printing, the Internet of Things, and robotics. And so we're seeing different kinds of manufacturing models which may bring production back closer to the consumers that are now taking products from all around the world. The very features of commerce that have gone back to the most ancient villages are also changing. The corner shop is being disrupted by meals on demand, by deliveries by drone, and by the Uberization of everything, products on demand. So these things are all changing. And of course, central to our work, the climate is changing, and the climate is changing really much faster than we might have anticipated. When BSR got started in 1992, the argument was that business should think about climate change because it would affect their future. It would affect companies' futures. Well, it's here now. That future is here now. It's making access to natural resources more difficult, access to water more difficult, creating migration patterns that are new, a lot of things that are changing the way we do things right now. And there's lots more change to come. That's very clear, that's very evident. That's what this part of the world really lives to create. Self-driving cars will be here before we know it. Artificial intelligence, personalized medicine, these are all things that are coming very fast, and the saying goes in Silicon Valley that the future arrives more slowly than you think, and then it happens all at once. And I think we'll see that all of these things are coming. And you can't say that these things are good or bad. They are good and they are bad. And in running a business, the question is, what do you do about it? How do you anticipate changes that create challenges, and how do you build a business that will be truly resilient? And we chose the theme of resilience not because it's a buzzword, but because we think it's absolutely central to the achievement of BSR's mission, working with business to create a just and sustainable world. That's what we're here to do, and to make that vision a reality, resilience is absolutely essential. So let me talk a little bit about how we're framing that concept over the course of the next couple of days. We've built a conference program that looks at resilience through the prism of 5 different dimensions: resilient companies, resilient leadership, resilient communities, resilient systems, and climate resilience. So we think about all those different things, and start out by asking what makes a resilient business, because presumably that's why most of you are here. You're here to think about what makes a resilient business different than one that's not resilient, one that's maybe more traditional. Well, there really are 3 things, I think. First of all, a clear sense of purpose. Secondly, foresight to understand how the world is changing. And third, a spirit of innovation to create those changes, not to wait for them to happen. So we hear a lot about purpose. Purpose is absolutely crucial. We know that generation of millennials want to work for purpose-driven organizations. And in creating a purpose-driven business, companies are learning to think about the essence of what they provide. So mobility, and not just cars; journalism, not just newspapers; well-being, not just pharmaceutical products. Companies that do that will undeniably be more resilient. Foresight is also essential. We live in a world where businesses can't assume that they will have the same position tomorrow that they have today. So if you take the S&P 500, the average lifespan of a company on that index over the last 50 years has gone from 61 years to 18 years. And the people who've looked at this did the math and said, I haven't tested this, but I think it's right, 75% of the S&P 500 companies today will not exist in 2032. Won't exist in 2032. So I remember when I came to BSR, the book Built to Last was something that everyone was reading, and that concept is becoming a lot more elusive. And so foresight is the only way, only if you apply foresight can you assume that your company is going to be here, even if you're one of the big companies on the S&P 500. And companies can sometimes, like all institutions, struggle with this. Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, gave a widely covered speech a month or so ago about climate change. And he talked about climate change as an example not of the tragedy of the commons, a phrase that a lot of people are familiar with, but a tragedy of the horizon, the inability of big institutions to think much further ahead than next quarter, next year, et cetera. And understanding the world isn't enough. Of course, innovation to meet the future is the ultimate goal, and we'll explore that here at the conference as well. Tomorrow morning, I'll be back on stage with Dame Ellen MacArthur, who spoke last year, and I'm delighted she's here this year, and we're going to talk a bit about how to advance the circular economy, a set of principles that reimagine how business is done, how value is delivered, and can be a huge driver of innovation. So that's resilient businesses. Resilient businesses require resilient leadership, and leadership is changing in some very, very fundamental ways. In the 21st century, leadership often means listening more than speaking. It requires partnerships, not silos, and it requires connection, not dictation. These are counterintuitive things for leaders. We grew up, many of us, with the notion that leaders do things by dictate, top down. That world is going away fast. There very often is no longer an official story about anything, and yet we still need leadership, but we need to reimagine leadership. So we've looked at leadership at BSR through a variety of lenses, particularly having to do with women's empowerment. And we have made a number of commitments, signing the Women's Empowerment Principles, by extending our HER project, our flagship project on women's empowerment, women's health, access to financial literacy and financial tools, and also a new collaborative initiative that we invite our members to participate in, investing in women, which we're pursuing with the International Council for Research on Women and the Oak Foundation. So different forms of leadership are absolutely needed for this. And resilient companies and resilient leaders then can build resilient communities. There's an old saying in American politics that goes, all politics are local. Well, I think all resilience is also local. If you think about challenges such as from Superstorm Sandy or the refugee crisis that is causing a lot of human suffering, but also a lot of debate and very local impacts in Germany and other parts of Europe. And yes, earthquakes, here they come again, in New Zealand and Chile and Japan. These are all things that affect us very locally. They affect individuals and families and homes and communities. And so local solutions are crucial. We'll be fortunate to hear at the conference from the chief resilience officers from the city of Berkeley, where I live, the city of San Francisco, where we all are, and the chief sustainability officer for the city of Palo Alto. The notion that cities now have chief sustainability officers is really fantastic, in my opinion. Great, great, great. And we'll hear from these local heroes talking about how they're building resilient communities here. And we often think about resilient communities in terms of physical infrastructure, and of course that's very, very important. All the examples I gave raise challenges about making sure infrastructure is viable, and that's of course important. But I think we need to think about resilient communities through the lens of social capital. How do we build communities that have a say in the investments that are made, where economic opportunities are available to the people who need them most, and where there are high levels of trust. Those are the intangible elements of resilient communities that businesses actually have a huge opportunity to help create, and businesses actually struggle to operate very often where that's not present. So the last dimension of resilience I want to talk about is the one that maybe all of you think about most when you think of resilience, and that has to do with climate. And here I think there's lots of reason to be very optimistic. And climate's important because if we don't have a resilient climate, actually none of the rest is possible. So this is crucial, and I think this is a year where in many ways we've reached a real tipping point with respect to climate. you have hundreds of companies, lots of other institutions, not only calling for a price on carbon, but applying a price on carbon. And that includes a lot of companies that are most heavily reliant on carbon, whether they're producing it, distributing it, et cetera. That was not happening until recently. Last month, 81 companies signed the White House Climate Declaration, stating, and many of the companies I think here in the room were part of this, stating their commitment at the White House, not only what they're doing in terms of their operations, but also making clear that they want to see a strong deal on climate in Paris in six or 8 weeks' time. That was not happening until recently. We've seen lots of companies commit to making major leaps forward on the use of renewable energy. The RE100, something that we've been helping to support, and our own Future of Internet Power initiative, amongst others, helping companies make the transition and make markets for renewable energy so that the price comes down, availability is much wider, and great progress is made. Individual companies have made great commitments. We've been very proud to work with General Mills over the last several months, and they made some very big commitments several weeks ago that will include working with their supply chain, an example of the kind of ambition on the part of individual companies that help to build a collective private sector response on climate and also strengthen the businesses that are making these commitments. Finally, we're very proud to be working within the We Mean Business Coalition. This is a great group of 7 organizations. We are one of the founding organizations. I've spoken about it at each of our last 2 conferences. I would say at the last 2 conferences, this was an initiative that had a lot of promise. I would say this is now an initiative that's delivering some real impact. We've helped to generate dozens, if not hundreds, of new commitments on everything from carbon pricing to use of renewable energy to policy advocacy. And I'm very proud that many of my colleagues and I will be at Paris helping to advance this agenda, demonstrating what the private sector is doing, and in doing that, demonstrating to government what is possible if we have smart policy that takes climate seriously. So we've had lots of years where we've seen carbon emissions and warming accelerate. I think this is the first time where we can stand up and say that climate action is accelerating as fast or faster than the climate is changing. And of course, that's exactly what we need. So there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. There are a lot of reasons to believe that we're making great progress, not only on climate, also related to the global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, which have created a template for business to figure out how it can make a contribution to human well-being, which of course is essential for addressing climate, and we won't have human well-being without a benign climate. And this is crucially important. We've been very proud to work with some of our member companies to build strategies to apply the global goals within their business. Another reason for optimism, apparently the federal law that prevented presidential candidates from using the term climate change has been repealed in the United States. So we now hear mention of this in the debate, and there are even some glimmers that more than one political party will actually be talking about climate change, and of course this is absolutely necessary. So there are a lot of great things happening. This is a moment where all of us working on sustainable business, all of the companies, civil society organizations, public sector institutions that we work with, there is a lot happening, and I think there is reason for optimism, and we have to meet this moment. And the 110 colleagues that I have at BSR, we are very proud to be supporting you on this journey. That's why we're here. So let me say a few more words about the conference. I think it will be a great few days. You'll have the opportunity to hear from a really interesting and diverse array of CEOs, civil society leaders, academic experts, leaders from a wide range of organizations. We will hear from a lot of interesting speakers in the breakouts, and I'm proud that more than half of the speakers at our conference are women. That is something that we worked hard to achieve. The conference team has done a great job on that, and we haven't quite gotten rid of all male panels. We have 2 of them, but we have 5 all female panels. So we're trying to make a difference on that as well. The conference ultimately, though, is really created by all of you, and while I know the numbers, it would be good if we can show people. How many people are here for their first BSR conference? It's a lot. That's a big number. Well, welcome. Please enjoy it. Tell us what you think. In addition to that, I can tell you that 1/4 of the people here at the conference come from BSR member companies who've been part of our organization for 10 years or more. So we're delighted that there are a lot of new faces, and we're delighted that there are a lot of very long-standing relationships that are reflected here. We've tried to build some new things into the conference. We have a BSR Connect Lounge that's just around the corner to the left, where over the course of the next couple of days you can meet with members of our team, and some of that's built into the conference agenda. We did a great offsite, a food and farming offsite to Marin County today. We've got another one coming for the Levi's Innovation Lab here in town, which is great. Tomorrow night there are food for thought dinners, self-organized dinners based on the themes of the conference, so sign up for those. And for anyone who's on a different time zone and is up early tomorrow morning, we've got a 5K run along the Embarcadero at 6:30 in the morning. There are very few more scenic places to go for a run in any city in America or around the world. And if you want to do something else, we also have chair massages. Or if you go for the run and you need a chair massage, we can make that happen. Lots of networking breaks. We've tried to listen to you. We want you to have a chance to do things in an unscheduled way. So there are a lot of breaks, and we want you to connect with each other. One request I want to make. We've got a wall, a blank wall, or more or less blank wall outside the ballroom. And we are working in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation over the next couple of years to catalyze some new partnerships to advance inclusive economic growth. And we're generating some ideas here at BSR. We're doing a meeting with some sharing economy companies on Thursday on this, but we want to hear from all of you. Give us your ideas about some big issues that we can get after through some new collaborations that bring, whether it's business to business or business, government, civil society. Let us know what you think. And the closing plenary is with Dr. Judith Roden, the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, and we're going to try to harvest some of those ideas and talk a little bit about that. And you know, what I would like better than anything is at our conference in New York, there's a subtle plug for next year's conference, next year to have some of those ideas for partnerships up and going. Let's try to make something new happen. Okay, I do want to thank our sponsors and supporters, including the Rockefeller Foundation, those who make this event possible. We thank you for your generosity. We'll be seeing on the screens and various signage mention of our sponsors, so thank you all very much. We really appreciate your support. Just close by saying that having worked at BSR for quite some time and knowing this community quite well, what I'm always reminded of at our conference is that you are all a group of people that does have a very strong sense of purpose. You have a strong sense of humanity, a lot of creativity, exactly the kinds of things, along with thoughtfulness, that make business at its best a force for really crucial progress in the world. And so I hope that that humanity, that purpose, that creativity, that insight will all be on display for the next couple of days. We will do all we can to make it happen, and I think that that is exactly the kind of approach that will help us build resilient business and a resilient world. So it is a pleasure to be with you to get things started. Before I step down from the podium, I have a great privilege of introducing a friend and very important new colleague, BSR's new chairman, Alessandro Carlucci. Alessandro stepped into that role on July 1st of this year, replacing Mats Lederhausen, who provided great support and challenge and service over the last 10 years. Alessandro joins us having led one of the most distinguished companies in the world when it comes to sustainability, Natura, a wonderful cosmetics, personal care company based in Brazil. He was the CEO for 10 years. He looks remarkably young for having run such a great company for such an extended period of time, and he has brought great new energy and insight and support, and I am utterly thrilled to be able to introduce him to all of you, and we'll hear his thoughts, a few comments, and also we'll do a Q&A with Mary Kay Magstad, who is a great journalist, was the Public Radio International correspondent in Beijing for how many years, Mary Kay? 10. Okay, so 13 years, lucky 13, doing absolutely fantastic reporting, great insights from China, has now returned to the Bay Area, and it's 21st century, my memory is failing me. Whose Century Is It? She has a great podcast called Whose Century Is It?, which gets after a lot of the very themes that we'll be talking about here today. I encourage you to listen, but Alessandro, why don't you come on up, and then Mary Kay will join in a minute. Wish you a great conference. Thank you very much.